Hello everyone. For my final presentation, I chose to do child neglect, causes and cures. I am just going to touch on what I believe to be something that really has an overall impact on child neglect and what we can or what can be done to help improve this. So let's get started. So the problem I identified was the overall community. This can be seen in a few different ways, but my solution mostly pertains to how the community can get involved to help those who are at greater risk of being affected by neglect. So one of the empirical articles I had used for my research was done by the Board on Children, Youth, and Families Institute of Medicine National Research Council. Basically, they talked about how the neighborhood a child lives in can greatly influence the likelihood of neglect. These three pictures show the main levels of a neighborhood. You have your lower, your middle, and your upper class. Most communities will still have this, and Springfield's a great example of this and makes it very relatable for today's society. So for a neighborhood that is considered lower class, it is less likely that they are to be educated on the topic of neglect. This could mean several different things. One may be that neglect is happening in their neighborhood and they're just unaware of the signs or things to look for, so it's less likely to be reported. It may also mean that neglect is actually happening in their household, and again, they just don't have those resources to either make it stop, or they may not know that it's happening. This slide is over material that we covered in Chapter 4 about neglect. The first thing is the theory of ecological causes, which is basically just the likelihood of neglect occurring in rundown neighborhoods due to the lack of resources and how the systematic oppression negatively impacts families. The next one was that poverty is indeed associated with neglect. Again, going back to what we talked about in the first slide, those lower income homes are more than likely at poverty level and are more susceptible to being associated with neglect. One of the types of neglect was failure to thrive. Failure to thrive can be seen in what was described as organic or non-organic factors. Non-organic factors included economic problems, exposure to infections, parasites or toxins, maybe so mold might be common these days, poor eating habits. So again, you see the economic problems, which can lead to both the exposure of those toxins and whatnot if they did not have the money to fix it. Or another thing that it is common is the eating habits in today's society. Sending children home for the week or the weekend with food or a backpack of food or whatever is still so common, so you know that it's still just a large problem in the communities. So this slide was done over another empirical article that I used for research. It's known as the Los Angeles Prevention Initiative Demonstration Project, and it was done by a network of local agencies. Basically, these agencies came together and they created a system to help members in the community become more aware of neglect. They created 6 main goals, but I just listed the 2 that pertain to the project most. So the first one was to identify families who may need more support. So what these local agencies did was reach out to the families that had been or were currently involved with the DCFS cases. The second goal was that the community was caring and responsive. Basically, throughout this prevention project, these local agencies of the community reached out to these families and helped guide them and teach them about neglect preventions. One of the main things that they tried focusing on with these families was the economic resources. So they offered things such as training in financial management, employment preparation, support for small business development, helping them find better job opportunities. They gave them GED information and employment training classes. The finding of this project was a strong improvement in social support. More and more families were getting involved, and those who had previously been involved or had been in touch with these resources before were continuing to get that support. Again, this was information that we had learned about in Chapter 4. It was about the treatment those may need and if they were involved in neglect. One of them was the different psychosocial factors. These included improving family dynamics, improving living conditions, and the parental attitude and behaviors. This picture just shows a small graph of how a family dynamic may be set up as a parent and what they think. It's a really good example of how parental attitudes and behaviors may need to be changed. And then lastly, for the overall solution, it was implementing more programs in education. The third empirical article that was done by the National Conference of State Legislators. Basically, this article was that the states were identifying the same problem that we have discussed throughout this project. They explained that child neglect was a complex social issue. One thing they touched on a little more was the high amounts of stress parents or caregivers may be experiencing. That can definitely contribute to the higher rates of child neglect. The article also discusses the how the states have adopted strategies to help prevent child neglect before it occurs. One of them was the early Head Start programs. Early Head Start programs are federally funded programs that offer low-income families access to early learning and education. This is great for those who may not have the financial stability to be in a daycare or and it's still helping children get those resources. And another one of them is the community health workers. This is someone who helps connect people with services and also healthcare providers about the health and social needs of people within their community. I think the NCSL has done a great job on starting the cures of preventing child neglect. However, I think to reach that ultimate goal of finding a cure, it will be something that the community as a whole should be involved in, not just those who get paid to do it. And then these are just my resources that I use for my empirical articles. So thanks for watching and listening to my presentation.